What happens when there's not a plot? I'm Karen Beery with Right Now Editing, where we turn good manuscripts into great books.
And I'm Peg Thomas, multi-award winning author and editor, and we are two editors for 5 minutes talking about plot. I
Yeah.
love plot.
And this is gonna seem interesting, but it's very true. And something that I've seen in the last few years with some manuscripts that have come through. Thankfully, I haven't been seeing this in published books, or at least any of the ones I've read. Um, but there literally isn't a plot. There might be character development, but there's no plot. So the two big ways in which I've seen this, the one is that the book is basically all backstory.
Yes,
Some of
I
that
have seen
happens.
that as well. The plot is there, but it's so off screen
Mhm.
that you never see it. And so it's not very interesting.
In one of the ways, I know it's a popular genre. I see this a lot in like the split timeline, where you have a character in the present and then you go back into the past. Really, you could cut almost all of those flashback scenes because it's just backstory. It doesn't. There's not a plot in and of itself. It's just all of these little, uh, just little stories, but it's not a full story. Um,
That could be why I don't read those.
they're not my favorite. There have been very few split timeline books that I've read where the past has its own plot and the present has its own plot and they work together. Almost every single one that I've read, almost I would say probably 95%, it's just an excuse to drop a lot of backstory into the book. And if you pull those out, you really only end up with a novella of about 20 to 40,000 words, and not much happens in it because you've taken 20 to 40,000 words to tell me about the past. Peg,
Yes, ma'am.
we were also talking about the no plot, the thinking. So tell
Yeah.
me what you've seen. I'll tell you what I've seen.
Um, I've read some books in the last few years, not a lot of them. I think most of the time this isn't a big issue, but I've read some where it's just you've got these two people and they're walking around in their own little world and they're doing their everyday things. But why should we care about it? The plot is why we care about what they're doing. We want to know how is what they're doing going to affect the overall story, right? Every scene should move the story forward. Every scene should be on that plot line. And when the scenes wander off the plot line, or you get to the end of the scene and you're thinking, well, that was really cool, but what does that have to do with the price of bread in Utah? You know what I mean? Um, it becomes hard to follow. And then you lose your readers because they're either bored or they're totally confused. You need the plot to keep the story moving forward and each scene on the plot to contribute to that moving forward. When you lose that, you just have characters muddling about in the story and the reader doesn't care.
And you actually can solve that issue the same way that you solve the issue with the split timeline is if I take this scene out and it doesn't impact the rest of the story, it doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
And the third
Or,
way I've
or
got,
sometimes there'll be like one little thing in that scene which you can add into a different one. You don't
yes.
need a whole scene for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we've got the one last, I've just got a minute left. Um, I've seen is the character development with no plot, which is essentially characters sitting around talking to each other and they describe a situation that happened and explain how they've changed, how they are doing things differently, but we never actually see them do it. We just see them sitting around telling people about it. So I guess technically there's a plot because they're telling us what happened, but literally the book is just people talking, whether
But
it's
that's like we
two.
said at the beginning. That's where the plot is happening so far off
Yep.
screen that the reader can't connect with it.
So in that situation, what you're looking for is if
Action.
your character is describing something that happened, you cut the description out and instead you show what happened. I like to tell my authors if it's important enough for your character to mention, Don't mention it, just show the scene while it happened. And that's a third easy way um that you're going to put the plot back into your story. But we've only got
Here's an example that maybe we'll go over just a minute, but this maybe will be a good example. If you have a story, which I'm going to go historical, go figure. If you have a story that has to do with, say, an Indian uprising in colonial America, and you're showing the entire story from the point of view of the people in the village, and nobody ever goes outside the village, how is that interesting? Right? You have to get somebody in the action. You have to involve somebody in what is the plot of the story. You can't just have them all sitting over here talking about it. Someone has to go out here and do it because that's what's interesting to a reader. Talking about it, not interesting. Action, interesting. So that's kind of that show, don't tell, maybe in a way.
absolutely.
Involve your characters in it.
All right. If you have any questions or if there's any part of this that you want us to go into more detail in later, let us know because we're always looking for topics.
Oh,
But
yeah.
until then, we'll brainstorm something and we'll come up with another topic for next week. I'm Karen Beery.
And I'm Peg Thomas, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.